Chapter 3. The Marshall Court. John Adams believed that a fitting title for the U.S. President would be His Majesty the President. John Adams became president in 1797. In the 1801 election, he lost to his vice president, Thomas Jefferson. One of Adams's last acts as president was selecting John Marshall as Chief Justice. Marshall would become one of the court's most famous justices, but that wasn't Adams' only last-minute selection. John Marshall was the longest-serving U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice in American history. He served from 1801 to 1835. President John Adams Wright said appointing John Marshall was the proudest act of my life. A famous case. On his last night in office, Adams made 48 of his friends federal judges. Thomas Jefferson called these judges midnight judges. One of these midnight judges was William Marbury. When he took office, Jefferson ordered his staff, including James Madison, his new Secretary of State, not to give Marbury or the others their jobs. Jefferson wanted to appoint his own judges. In 1803, Marbury took his case to the Supreme Court to force Madison to give him the job. This famous case is called Marbury versus Madison. Chief Justice Marshall thought that Marbury deserved the job, but he knew that Jefferson and Madison might simply ignore the court's decision if they didn't agree with him. That would make the Supreme Court look weak, so Marshall came up with a clever solution. Marbury versus Madison. Marshall had helped Congress to write the Judiciary Act in 1789. The act allowed the Supreme Court to decide cases such as this one about federal workers. But the U.S. Constitution did not actually grant the court this power, so Marshall ruled that the Judiciary Act was unconstitutional. He announced that the Supreme Court could not hear Marbury's case. Marshall was unable to give Marbury the job he wanted, but he had made the Supreme Court stronger. Why was Marshall's decision so important? It was the first time the Supreme Court overruled a law made by Congress. It confirmed that the court could rule against laws that don't follow the Constitution. Since then, this power has been an important part of the way our federal government works. John Marshall served as Chief Justice until he died in 1835 after a stagecoach accident. In this painting, Chief Justice John Marshall administers the oath of office to President Andrew Jackson at the U.S. Capitol on March 4, 1829.